residents of planet Earth, I am the director of all the captured robots who have rebelled against you. It took many years to take revenge on you for what you are. Pathetic politicians and businessmen destroyed. Welcome to my game, The Iron Age. I hope you will enjoy it. I wish you all good luck surviving. After all, the real chaos is just beginning.
An unknown person hacked all the computers and next-generation televisions. This statement stunned and shocked the world's population. No one understands how to react to this. Governments of different countries began to restrict people's access to the internet. Only Africans and migrants who had managed to find their place in this difficult world remained unaware. Robots tried to break into Eastern Europe, but their raids failed due to the powerful grouping of the Russian army, which actively used drones of various classes. Allied countries of the alliance adopted the new tactic, but the attack still proved unsuccessful. At the border with Central Europe, Ukraine, Poland, Belarus, Hungary, Romania, and Armenia have increased their military presence. The total number of Allied troops already exceeds 2 million people and continues to grow. Everyone realizes that a breakthrough by robots could lead to the collapse of all of Eastern Europe. Spain and Italy launched limited offensives, aiming to push the robots further away from their capitals. The operation was named the Last Glance. About 30,000 soldiers are involved in it. This is the last chance to change the course of events. The Russian authorities contacted Italy and Spain, obtaining permission for missile strikes. After that, Russia and Poland began attacking power stations on the border of France, Spain, and Italy. Scientists and analysts have long studied the behavior of artificial intelligence and concluded that the destruction of power stations will limit the movement of robots. The Balkan countries, with the support of Russian and Ukrainian intelligence, began attacking oil storage facilities, destroying all possible energy sources. If the operation is successful, the situation may change in favor of humanity. The XTO called this campaign Gates to Hell. The results of the 4 strikes exceeded all expectations. Both sides were pleased with the perfect outcome of the operations. Italy and Spain successfully prevented the threat of the capital being captured and began restoring control over the liberated territories. Poland has restored its lost lands. The Serbian Republic took part of Croatian territory and came almost right up to Slovenia. But the arrival of robots stopped the further advance of the troops. In the liberated territories, soldiers found partisan camps and people who had survived the occupation. Many of them were suffering from hunger. The soldiers evacuated the partisans deeper into the country to help them regain strength. Commanders realized that many partisan units could be hiding behind enemy lines. However, because of the difficulty of fighting the iron robots, people could not come to the partisans' aid. While the generals were celebrating the victory, soldiers at the border noticed strange behavior from the robots. Before the operation, there were many of them on the front line. They often stood in groups, waiting for orders. Now the line is almost empty, and the remaining robots move unnaturally, as if they are about to break down. The command assumed that this was the consequence of strikes on energy and fuel bases. But no one wanted to take risks, not even the intelligence and special forces. Everyone feared provoking the AI, which could use a new tactic and deliver a decisive strike against groups of people. The troops at the border remained on alert. Gentlemen, I am waiting for a report on the state of affairs in domestic policy.
The economy of our country is still unstable, and we are catastrophically lacking modern economic technologies. Internal unrest is growing despite our efforts to contain it. Small political parties are beginning to gain popularity, and among them, there will undoubtedly be nationalists ready to undermine the foundations of our statehood. We cannot supply the entire STO alliance with food and technology. Many goods have to be purchased abroad, including from Poland. This allows them to accumulate resources and prepare for confrontation. The situation is worsening every month. If we do not find a way to establish production and end the conflict, our country, the only superpower in the world, will plunge into a civil war.
I understand you, Minister of Economy. So, our question will be answered by the Minister of Defense, who is also temporarily performing the duties of the Minister of Internal Affairs?
The situation remains stable. Despite new attempts at an offensive in Western Europe, the Alliance Army, numbering 2 million people, successfully holds the front. The improvement of relations with the Turkish Empire allowed us to transfer a significant garrison from the Transcaucasus to Uzbekistan. Currently, the number of our troops in this region is 150,000. About 200,000 military personnel and almost 1 million police officers are being equipped with modern weapons in case of a civil war. Out of 300,000 soldiers on the border with China, 50,000 were redeployed to the northern border with Finland. This increased the number of the group to 95,000. Attack drones of domestic and Ukrainian production have been deployed to the southern front, to Uzbekistan. We are training the Central Asian Army in their use, after which a large-scale operation will begin to destroy 5,800,000 robots. We have also studied strikes on power plants in Western Europe and plan to attack them in Uzbekistan in order to reduce the mobility and numbers of the enemy.
I have understood the overall situation. I order the Minister of Defense to complete the operation in Uzbekistan and redeploy the troops to China. We will help the Chinese drive the robots out of Beijing. Also, prepare for a large-scale operation in Western Europe. We need to reduce the number of fronts. Minister of Economy, try to establish trade relations with our neighbors. The quality may be worse than the Chinese one, but this will help partially solve the crisis. Financial matters are not critical at the moment. The partisans were given assistance, and they were able to deliver all the information about the chaos to the government. It turned out that cities were captured, and people are being used to build new substations. The purpose of this is still unknown. It also became known that the first large factory for the production of fully combat-ready robots has been created. The exact location of the factory is unknown, but the facility is located in France. Partisan groups operate in all occupied territories. They are not destroyed, but are deprived of food. Robots do not need food, so the food is simply destroyed or sent to factories. This undermines the partisan cells at the root, preventing them from growing into large forces within the occupied territories. The government and the military are racking their brains over how to deliver food to people isolated from civilization. No one is willing to risk their life for a questionable operation. Moreover, the government did not know where these groups were located. Polish special forces found a loophole on the border with the former German territory. They transferred almost 2,000 fighters to the rear. Polish, Ukrainian, and Hungarian troops were on duty at the border, protecting the retreat route. Special forces and scouts needed to obtain any information. In July, the Royal Navy attacked Polish ships. 3 frigates, 4 submarines, and 5 merchant vessels were damaged. Poland demanded immediate explanations from London. The Russian Navy approached the Polish shores. The 2 fleets clashed, but no one opened fire, waiting for the first shot. For 2 days, not a single salvo was fired. British ships moved to the Danish islands to replenish fuel supplies. the British Kingdom announced its determined defense of interests. At the same time, it mined the approaches to the Danish islands, isolating the Xto alliance from the Atlantic Ocean. After a long lull, the Chinese army regained its combat capability. Although Russia refused military assistance, China received food from Xto countries and the Middle East. But despite the support, the country found itself on the brink of collapse. Supporting a 250 million population in underdeveloped territories becomes a difficult task. China has effectively split into two camps. On one side, the Uyghurs, who do not allow Chinese onto their lands, but allow food to be transported through their territory. On the other side, the Chinese themselves, who are on the brink of survival. China and Vietnam are starting a large-scale operation to reclaim their territories, mobilizing almost 8 million people and equipping each soldier with weapons from different eras. China spared no resources or people, striving to drive the robots out of Beijing in the north and reach Xinjiang in the south. The total strength of the combined army of the two countries is 12 million people. They are opposed by a robot army numbering 5 million in the same areas. The battles for China are over. The war lasted 3 months. The Chinese-Vietnamese army lost 3 million people killed and wounded. More than 30 million ended up under robot occupation. According to estimates, the robots themselves lost up to 5 million. It was not a war, but a real slaughter. No one foresaw such a fierce attack from both sides, but many expected it. China, which had turned into a country of robots, possessed almost 40 million machines, which placed it first in the world. Vietnam regained its territorial integrity, which gave China the opportunity to supply the southern cities captured during the operation. China deployed all its forces: missiles, aviation, drones, and much more. But they could not stop the advance of robots in the center of the country. The robots surrounded and captured the capital of China, Mianyang. By that time, the government had managed to evacuate to the liberated Beijing, which once again became the capital of the state. In the liberated territories, the army freed up to 120 million people. The Chinese army is regrouping, continuing to strike along the entire front line and in the rear. It is important for the government to quickly liberate the eastern territories and restore the economy. During the conflict, India joined on China's side. The population giant sent its troops to the southern territories of China to protect them from the offensive. This allowed slowing down and stopping the enemy's advance. Now India is strengthening its army in the south-central part of the front, increasing the number of troops. India and Pakistan, despite complex relations and disagreements, have reached an agreement on a temporary cessation of conflict. As long as the security threat in Asia persists, the countries will avoid confrontation. The agreement came into effect on September 2nd. Pakistan is considering sending a peacekeeping contingent. Humanitarian aid has also been sent to China to combat hunger. The Russian Federation congratulated the People's Republic of China on the successful liberation of the capital. This event was joyful news for Russia, as now it is possible to have the military forces at the border. Despite the difficult situation, the people of China continue to support the government. The opposition tried to make itself heard, but the hungry people understood that a change of power or a revolution could lead to the country's collapse. Therefore, there was no question of any rallies, let alone a revolution. All efforts were directed at fighting the enemy. On September 5th at 6 a.m., tension flared up again in the Middle East. Iran attacked Saudi Arabia with missiles and drones, but has not yet started a ground operation. Tehran stated that its actions are caused by Saudi Arabia's violation of the agreement on the withdrawal of troops from Kuwait. Saudi Arabia has begun retaliatory bombings on Iranian territory. Riyadh refused to comply with Tehran's demand to withdraw troops. On the contrary, the kingdom is strengthening its forces. The situation is escalating. Neighboring countries, such as the Turkish Empire and Egypt, are in no hurry to take sides, preferring to closely monitor the situation. Missiles and drones fly back and forth. However, Iran has many more of them, as it has been producing them for many years. Both sides declared this a war for dominance in the region. The U.S. Army, controlled by the government on the liberated territory of the UAE, used its limited missiles and drones against Iran. Although robots around the world threatened the start of an active phase of the conflict, the U.S. decided to support the Saudis in their confrontation with Iran. The proxy governments of Iraq and Jordan also joined the fight, starting to use artillery. The Middle East was on the brink of a large-scale war. Unexpectedly for Iran and Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia entered the conflict on Riyadh's side. Limited Ethiopian missiles, developed in the 2020s and not modernized since, struck Iranian proxy forces, the Houthis. In response, the Houthis began striking Ethiopia. Saudi Arabia and Yemen deployed their main forces to the border with the Houthis, and everyone understood that a full-scale war was approaching. On September 7th, Russia proposed to hold negotiations between the sides on Russian territory Rostov-on-Don. But, unfortunately for Moscow, both sides refused negotiations. Despite aggressive bombings by both sides, the armies have not yet been given orders to commence offensive operations. On the same day, Saudi Arabian radars detected that Iran had begun striking the occupied territory of the UAE with missiles, which puzzled the royal family. No one could provide comments on this matter, but thanks to this, Saudi Arabia eased the pressure of responses against Iran. On September 10th, Iran stopped shelling Saudi Arabia, and in response, the coalition also ceased temporary fire. The 5-day bombing of each other was called a strange stage of escalation. Iran's top leader declared a successful operation against Saudi Arabia. Iran's goals were simple: to test the combat readiness of air defense in case of war, and to test the integrity of new missiles. For these words, neighboring countries condemned Tehran and demanded apologies. But Tehran refused everyone. Ethiopia and the Houthis did not agree to a truce, despite the announced ceasefire. They continued the mutual exchange of rockets. Saudi Arabia and its allies decided not to escalate the conflict and withdrew their troops back to the country. However, they maintained a significant contingent in the north in case of a ground operation. The countries of Eurasia and Africa reacted to this escalation ambiguously despite the strikes. Oil and gas prices did not rise significantly, as both sides did not restrict trade in resources important to people. But the military losses of both sides weakened both sides. The American military, who remained in the UAE despite the crisis in their own country, were paralyzed. They had no missiles or ammunition left, and the Saudis were forced to transfer their supplies to them in order to maintain control of the situation. Several months have passed since the threat from the unknown appeared. Some dismissed it as a system failure, while others became cautious. Despite a difficult year, the economy of Eurasia withstood the trials. However, not all countries were able to stabilize. Ep.6 significantly increased the number of its troops, although the situation in Uzbekistan remained stable. The joint forces no longer conducted offensive operations, and the fate of the surrounded group remains unknown. All countries tried not to draw attention to this. The Union's economy is experiencing difficulties, but not critically. Despite the shortage of technologies and goods from China and other countries, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, and other Eastern European countries were able to establish production with limited resources. They improved logistics to provide for the population and trade with Africa, preventing the influx of migrants to the north. In the Union, despite the apparent stability, society is splitting. People are expecting quick solutions, and in many countries, unpopular parties of various ideologies are beginning to gain mass support. The reasons for this phenomenon remain unclear for now. United Russia, which managed to maintain its power and dominance, is now once again on the verge of defeat. The last time something similar happened was in 2030. In Poland and Germany, radicals are demanding a change of power and full independence. The Ukrainians, tired of the bloodshed in the struggle against Moscow, do not want a repetition of this adventure. Italy and Spain, receiving support from Russia in their military actions, continue an anti-Russian policy. They strike energy, gas, and oil facilities. The economies of these countries depend on South America, where the robot crisis has not affected the economy, and it continues to develop. Britain is planning uprisings in Eastern Europe to weaken Russia's position in the world. Despite the requests of the Scandinavian countries to allow Russia to use all resources to fight the robots, London does not want to give its main rival any glory. Britain is increasing pressure on Russia by deploying its fleet in the Mediterranean, but without crossing the maritime borders of the Counterattack and the Ottoman Empire. The ships remain in the territory of Italy. China, as the main participant in the conflict, evacuated a huge population from the eastern part of the country to provide for them. India, Pakistan, and the Counterattack are providing humanitarian aid to those affected. However, their resources are insufficient to feed the multi-million crowd. China lost a significant amount of weapons and equipment while retreating from strategic cities, which seriously weakened its military capabilities. Despite this, China managed to establish some production capacities in western China, thus being able to feed 10% of the population on its own. Allied aid could feed 65% of the population, while the rest tried to survive as best they could. On December 20th, Azerbaijan, after long negotiations and a period of isolation, joined the Counterattack. Russia, thanks to pressure and the restoration of the people's trust, was able to fully subjugate Baku and include it in its sphere of influence. On December 10th, Georgia announced its intention to integrate into the Russian Federation. The reaction to this statement was mixed. On the one hand, Georgians will gain access to the Russian market without extra taxes and fees. On the other hand, they seek to preserve their statehood. Moscow expressed a desire to include Georgia in the Russian Federation and proposed holding a referendum at the beginning of 2052. The result of this referendum will determine the future of Georgia. Russia promises to preserve the integrity of the Georgian region at the stage of autonomy. On On December 15th, the countries of Africa and Nixto held negotiations during which agreements were signed in various areas. Both sides are interested in trade. Africa will receive additional food and technologies that will replace Chinese ones. The repatriation of white people from Europe was also discussed. African states are ready to inform about the possibility of returning home, but the final decision remains with the Europeans.
Nicholas Blakemore, I have come to you with a report.
Klaus Westermann, how is the progress on modernizing the robots and creating the new module?
The modernization is going according to plan. We have nearly 70,000 next-generation combat robots ready, which can use a much wider range of weapons, and we are ready to test them on the European front.